Good evening, Dr. Shetty. Yeah, good evening. So we're all set to start. We'll just take some more minutes, 9 minutes left, and we'll start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Deepa. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, all the parents presented here today and the eminent panelists. I welcome Dr. Anand Lakshman, Dr. Preet Shetty, and Dr. Deepa Padvari today for this very, very important discussion. And I just want to... Yeah. Am I audible to everyone? Yes.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Thank you, sir. It's been a very difficult and different year for the world outside. But as a proactive school, we have taken many decisions to make our children feel at home, but the education was on. Because of different information from media, we are overwhelmed with the knowledges. But the problem is that exactly what we want to know, what clarity we want to share with each other, how to take care of our children at home, and what will happen now onwards, that's our question. And unfortunately, we don't have specialists at home to answer all our queries or to overcome our fear factors. So today, we are very fortunate to have these three eminent panelists who are serving the mankind through their medical professions for more than 15-20 years. Dr. Anand Lakshman, who is actually working as public health specialist, is also heading the Address Health, which is a huge part of Chitrakoota Institute. And we know that he is working on various fields in, as you have seen in PPT also, he can help us to know what exactly we can have the knowledge to make our children comfortable, to make our children understand that what is happening, and as a parent, what is our duty to do. Dr. Preet Shetty, who is not at all unknown to this side of Bangalore, and most of us, we have visited his clinic as parents with our children. He is there to help us to know what is happening as a clinical pediatrician in his chamber with his experience of treating thousands of children during this tough time. Dr. Deepa, who is also a pediatrician attached to Address Health, she is also going to share her knowledge and her understanding with us today. So we are so fortunate to have all three of them to clarify our doubts, our questions, and to overcome our fear factor, to know the reality of COVID-19, all the Delta Plus, or the third wave, or the vaccination. At this moment, I would like to know, at this moment, I would also like to thank all my parents who are present here with their immense successful collaboration. The Montessori children are actually working at home. They have taken the places of Montessorians, and without their immense support, the Chitrakoota wouldn't have been able to do whatever we are doing today for each child. So thanking everyone, I am starting this panel discussion today. The thing is that throughout the COVID-19, dilemma, or the kind of, uncertainty what we are going through, we come to know a lot of things about adults getting COVID affected and hospitalization and the fatal, news. Every day we are getting lots of information, but hardly we understand that there are one full generation waiting for us to be taken care of, by us. They are our children, our tiny tots. What is happening there? What kind of symptoms we can find out? What kind of symptoms we need to know, that whether children are also there at the same time, whether any infection is happening there, what is happening among children what are the problems we are suspecting to happen to our children, how to protect them, how to take care of them. So I would like to request our parent, M1 parent, Bhumika Fanis Rao's parent, to ask this question to this panel, because these same questions we have received from many parents. So I would request Bhumika Fanis Rao, M1 parent, to ask the question what he has sent to us.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, doctors. I'm glad this session has been organized. Definitely adds a lot of value to all the parents. My question is more in terms of understanding how the immune system of kids, more specifically in their age group of 3 to 7 years, how immune are they? Also for the fact that, from the time they are born until they reach that 5 to 6 years of age, there is a series of vaccinations that they go through. It may be H1N1, influenza, and various other vaccinations. So how protected are our kids? And COVID-19 itself is a fear that each one of us have. So what is the kind of protection they already have? How strong is their immune system? So what is it that we need to take care of? A simple flu or a viral fever puts us as adults down for a good 5 days, if not more. So when it comes to kids, what is that we need to do? How do we understand this?
May I request Dr. Preet Shetty to answer these questions, because I know you have served so many children during this pandemic with your own experience, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, parents. Good evening, panelists. See, there are a few myths here regarding COVID-19 infection in children. First and foremost, there was a myth that children are always protected. They may not catch the infection, which again is a myth. Of course, children can get infected, but what we need to understand, 80 to 85% of the cases are absolutely asymptomatic. And most of these infections are infections occur in the house. Invariably, one of the parent would have got infected and the parent would have come in contact with the child. Mind you, before you start showing symptoms, 2 days prior to the onset of symptoms, you will be shedding the virus. So if the child comes in contact with you, even 2 days prior to the onset of your symptoms of COVID, child is exposed to the virus. But fortunately, 80 to 85% of these children are absolutely asymptomatic. These are picked up only when we do the test as a measure of surveillance of the household contacts. So this is one thing which we need to make it very clear. Somehow in children, COVID-19 infection is very mild. About 12 to 13% of them have only mild infections, which could be in the form of mild fever, cold, cough, which lasts for about 2 to 3 days time, and then they settle down. Then another 2 to 3% of them can develop into moderate infection of about mild fever, early pneumonia, which normally settles down over a period of about 7 to 10 days time. Very rarely, less than 1% of these children can go into severe infection. Mind you, children who go into moderate or severe infection are the ones who already have some other health problem. Invariably, it could be a problem with the heart. They could be having a congenital heart disease, or it could be a renal problem or a liver problem, or their immunity could be very low. There are some children who do have an innate immunodeficiency. So these are the ones who can go into moderate or severe infection. And even children, severe infection is less than 1% of the cases. They can go into severe pneumonia, or some of them can go into septicemia, what we call infection has spread into the bloodstream, or some of them can go into multi-organ dysfunction. In adults, the infection shows a different way of prevalence there. And The manifestation of infection in adults is not per se due to the COVID infection. The major problem in adult occurs due to hyperimmune response of the adult to the infection. That is why they end up having severe pneumonitis. They end up having vascular thrombosis, that small vessels in the lungs get thrombosed, and that is how they end up having major problem in the lung. Whereas in children, most of them have low levels of ACE receptors. So these ACE receptors are very, very important for the virus to bind and cause the infection. So the ACE receptors in children are very low. So that is one of the reasons why they end up having very mild infection or asymptomatic infection also. And most of children are exposed to cold viruses, especially children less than 8 years of age. They do end up having recurrent upper respiratory infections. And these cold viruses are all corona group of viruses. So they do have some amount of resistance to most of these corona group of viruses. Apart from that, God has been very kind to us. Children are saved from the COVID-19 infection. If you look at the prevalence of the disease, 80 to 85% of them are absolutely asymptomatic and they don't need any medicines. They just recover at home. You give them vitamin C, you don't give them vitamin C, they recover. Then you have small number of children, about 12 to 13% of them who have mild infections, who require medicines for fever, cold, cough, that's all, and they recover. Only those who have moderate or severe infection, that accounts to less than 2 to 3% of the population who end up having infection, who require hospitalization, who require treatment in the hospital. Very few of them do require ventilation. There was a question also regarding the ventilation also. Okay, very few of them do require ventilation. And as such, the death rate in COVID in children is very less. So we can be quite assured infection in children, majority of them, 97% of them will be mild or asymptomatic infection only.
Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you, sir. And your internet was getting little stuck. So if by chance something can be done, sir, it will be very helpful. But we could hear you. Yes, yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you. So as doctor was talking, I could find that, there were many parents, like, for example, Anvik P. Goda of NDH M2, parent also asked about the hospitalization. And I think doctor has already answered that question. So I feel that most of you who were represented by Anvik P. Goda's parents, that sir has asked, but I want to repeat that. The hospitalization or the ICU and ventilation questions was answered by sir already. Okay. My next question is, from many parents, which I request Ayush Deshpande, NDH M1 parent, to ask Dr. Anand. This question is for Dr. Anand because he's asking on a broader scale. So can we have Ayush Deshpande, NDH M1 parents, to ask your question?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for arranging this wonderful session to clear our doubts. My question was to Dr. Preet regarding do children recover faster compared to adults? And do they need some kind of vaccination, like a flu vaccine? For example, we are hearing a lot of doctors speaking to us and asking us to get flu vaccine done for the kid so that these symptoms and other things subside and it will not be confused with the corona symptoms. So do these vaccines actually help, the flu vaccines for COVID? And do children recover faster than adults? Do you have any data regarding that? This is my question.
Yeah, I will take that question initially and then ask Dr. Preet to respond further because ma'am suggested. Yeah. But we have two eminent pediatricians on this panel. they definitely like to hear that, most people tend to think of children as small adults. And that is the biggest mistake we can make. Children are not small adults. Pediatricians are not just small doctors. They are very huge doctors, right? So children are not small adults. Don't start thinking that, okay, children are very weak and they are very small. Their physiology, their way of the immune system, the exposure is very different. So what Dr. Preet said, essentially, again, I am just capturing the same thing, that because of the design of nature, AC receptors in children are low. Therefore, children are not getting as much of the infection as we are seeing in adults. That is on the viral load part, the first infection. Also, very importantly, the progression of the disease in all people, in adults, is based on how the body reacts and not just the virus. Only in the first few days, the virus is replicating in the body. Rest all, whatever we are seeing all the ill effects we have seen over time is how the body reacts. And therefore, by God's grace, as the viral load itself is not significant with AC receptors being low, and then the immune system in children does not react the way it reacts in adults. Therefore, the course of illness is very different in children, and don't just take it as, okay, in children, it will be just like in adults. It is very different, and it is very mild in children. Very importantly, you raised about vaccination. I will leave it to the pediatricians to answer from their perspective. I will just give broad public health perspective on vaccination. Okay. Vaccination programs are carried out for two basic purposes. It has to stand the test of two or three things. One, of course, it has to stand the test of safety and the test of benefits and efficacy. Okay, every vaccine has to be safe, every vaccine has to be beneficial. But within benefits, any vaccine you want to evaluate, you see, is this going to prevent significant death, disability, suffering in that age group whom you are vaccinating? Second, is this vaccine going to cut the chain of transmission such that the natural course of progression of epidemiology of the disease can be changed? If these two questions are answered in a very simple way, you will know the answer to what you are asking, but the experts will say more. Thank you.
Yeah. Coming to the part about the progression of the disease in children. Invariably, what we find most often, children who do have mild infection or moderate infection, they do settle down by about third or fourth day. Since they do not have a hyperimmune reaction, what we find in adults, they settle down as good as a simple flu infection. Even if they go into moderate infection, most of them settle down by about 7 to 10 days with supportive measures of cough, medications, and sometimes even giving steam itself will help them. Only those who end up having severe infection will require intense medications. Third thing about the flu vaccination. See, flu and swine flu vaccinations will give you protection against the flu and swine flu viruses only. There is no cross protection with COVID. So let it be very clear, you are protecting your children against flu and swine flu. Why do we need to protect our children against flu and swine flu? That's another question. Children less than 5 years, when they get infected with the flu virus or the swine flu virus, the infection can be quite severe. Unlike COVID infection, there the infection can be quite severe. So we need to protect our children against flu and swine flu per se, rather than getting any cross protection against COVID. So the whole idea of asking you to take the vaccine for flu and swine flu is to protect your child against flu and swine flu, which are quite dangerous infection in children less than 5 years of age. We do end up having a lot of children in the hospital, in the ICUs with swine flu pneumonia. So that's the reason why we do ask the people to take the flu and swine flu vaccination, not for the protection against COVID.
Right, doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would like to just, ask you that with your clinical experience, you and Dr. Deepa, both of you, that what is the experience what you had, treating children for last 1.5 years? Like, you personally had any experience to share with us that how many children you have seen in clinic who had these symptoms of COVID and how the recovery process was. If that you can say both of you, one after another, sir and ma'am, it will be very helpful for all of us.
Dr. Deepa, you go ahead first. I'll talk later.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I just want to tell all of you that definitely in the first wave, I think the number of kids affected were very few, as Dr. Preet may also support that. And we saw, in fact, I think less than 200, 300 cases, even with busy practicing pediatricians. And like he said, most of them had acquired it from somebody who was, living with them. It could be parents or grandparents or the child's caretaker, it could be anyone. But since the second wave had, as such, large numbers proportionately, and also the second variant being a little more infective than the first one, the Delta variant. So we saw many more children being affected with the illness. But large numbers, in fact, majority, to be very frank, I think I have managed at least around 400 to 500 cases of, COVID affected children. And I have probably got blood investigations only in about 3 or 4 of them, and 0 admissions. I have not had to admit a single child in the hospital. One more thing I want to add to what we talked about hospitalization, the data that we have. Large numbers are coincidental finding of children testing positive who were admitted for other procedures or other illnesses, whereas COVID primarily was not the reason for admission. That is also another thing that I want to stress on. So majority, I would say almost 99.9% of them needed very minimal intervention. Just basic symptomatological management, controlling the temperature, making sure the hydration is good, making sure the cough and cold are not bothering the child too much, good nutrition. That is all we needed to do. Almost, I think, very similar to a common flu, in fact, much lesser, was how we managed the children, and they all recovered very well. So, Dr. Preet, you can share your experience.
Yeah. See, the one thing that we need to emphasize here, the first cycle was a very prolonged cycle when we were hit with COVID in early March, but the numbers were very few and meager because of the lockdown. Continuously, we had very low number of cases. But towards the end of June and early July, we started getting a surge in infection, and it lasted all the way up to October or even up to November. So it was a very prolonged first wave of COVID, which we had. Even though we had a prolonged wave of COVID, but the number of infections in children were lesser, very true. And apart from that, maybe there was also some amount of hesitancy amongst the parents to bring the children for the testing, to bring the children for even for consultation also was there in the first cycle. Whereas in the second wave, we had a very steep cycle, and within a short period of about a month, we had a surge wherein we were getting about lakhs of cases in a day. Okay, we almost went up to about 50,000 cases in a day. So this was quite evident during the second wave of the COVID. And as such, when you have such huge number of cases coming in, obviously more number of children also will get affected. So during this first wave, I think we would have seen mostly about 80 to 100 children only with diagnosed cases of COVID. Of course, ILI were always there, but people were hesitant to go ahead and get investigated. Whereas with the second wave, people were ready to go ahead with the investigation. That's how we ended up having huge number of cases. Maybe about, like I was just going through the data, we had about 4,230 odd cases in the second wave. And only 3 of them needed admission. All the others, majority of them were asymptomatic, who were picked up when parents who had COVID, and then they were investigated and the children were found to have COVID. And very few of them required medicines. And what is very important is all of them recovered very well. Only 3 of them required admission. Coincidentally, one of them came with symptoms of appendicitis. And when we investigated her, because we had to operate on her, and found that the whole family had COVID, and the child was also diagnosed to have COVID. Other than that, the other 2 children had coexisting comorbidities. One of them had a myelofibrosis. That's the reason why I had to admit the child. And another child had persistent fever for more than 7 days. So we needed to investigate him further, and we had to admit the child because the child was having high-grade fever up to 8th day, and which subsequently subsided. What we found in the second wave is some children do end up having prolonged fever, sometimes even lasting up to 8 to 10 days also. And all of them recovered very well without any sequelae. So that is one thing which we need to emphasize here. All of them recovered, whomever we had seen with COVID in our clinic.
Thank you, Dr. Deepa. Thank you, Dr. Shetty. I would like to go to the next question, which has been asked by some parents, some of you. And I would like to ask Disha Chowdhury, NDH M3 parent, to ask the question. And I feel that if Dr. Anand can, answer these questions. Disha Chowdhury, NDH M3 parents, please pose your questions now.
Yeah, hi.
Yes.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, my apology first. Due to streaming or network issue, I'm not able to switch on the video.
Okay.
So the question was more, I think, already answered by doctors. But yeah, I have got some follow-up questions from that. Now, as a doctor initially said that around 85 to 87% kids are kind of asymptomatic, right? So yeah, there is a chance of remaining 13%. And what about that? And how we can deal, because we don't know who is falling in the 13% gap. And the second part is like, as we see that from the first phase to second wave, first wave to second wave, the increase is huge. Yes, the Delta variant, what we understand is major cause for it. And then what we are listening and what the expert also saying that wave 3 can come. How we assume that wave 3 will not have a new variant, which will be more deadlier than wave 2. And yeah, it's the surprise for the adults also, as well as the kids also, from wave 1 to wave 2. Maybe that can persist for wave 3 or how we judge that as a parent.
So I get that question, Deshna's parent. It's a question which all prime TV debates are being held on, right? So this panel cannot replace a 9 p.m. shouting match, but I'll try to give you some facts. Okay, one thing is, it is no point in being an astrologer and predicting when we were not able to predict second wave and the magnitude. Now we talk about third wave and then fourth wave. We have to understand what the virus is doing. Okay, this virus is not going to disappear. Let us make a fact. This virus is not going to disappear from the face of planet Earth. We have to learn to live with it. It has to learn to live with us. Okay. What do all viruses do? All viruses mutate. It is not some new thing that we are discovering. All viruses mutate. All viruses tend to mutate towards they are trying to become their survival chances. They are trying to increase. Okay. And always viruses mutate. More the infections, more the replications, more the replications, more the mutations. It is like taking Xerox copy in a photocopier. Okay. You keep taking thousands of photocopies of one book. Slightly the book will move here and there. The copy will appear slightly different from the original copy. This is what happens in virus mutation. But typically all viruses mutate towards becoming less deadlier but more infective. The virus wants to survive. The virus wants to live in more and more people so that it can spread to more and more people. Now, when you know what happened, why the difference between first wave and second wave, it is because the virus in its new variant became much more infective. It means in the first wave, typically R naught or the one person's ability to infect another person was ranging around 1.6 to 2. one infected person was infecting 1.5 to 2 people. But in the second wave, one infected person infecting nearly 4 people, because the virus became much more adaptive and started saying, let me go to many more people. So what we saw is a result of the stress on the health systems. Okay. So, but that what it has also done is it has spread to a large number. As you see today, there's data coming out which shows that in Indian population, maybe somewhere around 60 to 70%, depending on the micro communities. We have to do more studies in each micro community. 60 to 70% of people have already acquired antibodies. So the virus will also adapt itself. And as we see with H1N1 and other things, it will become endemic. It will remain in low circulation, having sporadic outbreaks here and there, for which surveillance is a must. Vaccination and preventive strategies are a must. This is the bigger picture on where this virus is going. It is going to live with us, but we are going to realize more and more. We know this fellow now, okay? We know him better. It's like a marriage. Now we know this fellow. We have to learn to live with that guy, whether good or bad. Now we will adjust and learn to live with it. Okay, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Before going to the next question, I would like to take up the question which is asked to us or me, representing the school. How school is going to take care of the situation. We all understand that sooner or later, the children need to come to school. There is no doubt about that. The question is how, when, and what can we do? So from my past experience of first phase and second phase, what we have done in Chitrakoota, I can give you as an example. We were the first few schools, maybe the first one around this locality, who have brought our children to school for real schooling after a long time. And they were with us for 4 months almost. And we were almost like a paranoid school, got the testing done for all the children, all the staff, all the faculties who were present in the building 4 times. And with God's grace, not even a single person was positive at that time. So it was taken to the utmost priority that we were getting everybody tested at that time. And we made our COVID team, who were trained by the professionals and who actually helped us to let us know that how these situations could be handled. Because children are, after all, children. We all know that they need a constant reminder. They need to know how they are going to handle themselves in school also. Later, when the vaccination started, all our staffs and the family members are vaccinated. Each and everybody. You name it, from chairman to principal to security guards to IMAs, driver uncles, everyone. Nobody left in school who is not vaccinated. Second thing is that we have done 2 drives for our parents also, so that our parents also take the chance of getting vaccinated. And thanks go to Dr. Anand also. He has helped us wholeheartedly to make these things possible. And sanitization regularly, or making the social distancing, to make the children understand the social distancing, or to maintain the classroom facilities much more available for the children. All those things are done. When we come down to our future plan, we only can tell you that seeing this, the arrangements or understanding the requirements, we have many classrooms. We have created many more classrooms where children can come in bubbles. So if a Montessori child is under one mother teacher, when the group is of 12 children, obviously we will be calling alternate days only 6 children. So a lot of things can happen when children are less in number. And as you can understand that one particular teacher, one particular adult is always there to help the children, to remind them, to take care of them when they are at school. So from our side, we are as much as possible ready to understand the gravity of the situation and to be there for our children, because we understand that it is an important sector of their life. Why I'm telling this last line, I would again would like to go back to the doctors who will be telling us what is their experience, as if children are kept for 1.5 years at home, and parents are also working from home. This is looking like a new normal, but we all understand it is not natural. Why it's not natural? What is the problem? Is it about only education we are talking about? It is about writing and reading and knowledge? Definitely not. We are today here actually to discuss also that major thing which is called mental well-being of the child, which is much more important for us to concentrate on. And I know all three of these eminent personalities, they have understood that personally. What is the implication, what the child is going through. So I would like to
Ma'am, just on the topic of school preparedness, you have missed two things. You're being too nice. You have missed two things your school has done. I want to add. One, you have done COVID preparedness audits.
Yes.
You are one of the few schools who has done a detailed COVID preparedness audit. Second,
yes.
as per the guidelines that we have given you with the COVID preparedness guidelines, you have formed your school emergency response team. You have formed your three teams, your communications team, your disinfection and sanitation team, and your medical preparedness team.
Exactly.
So you have formed three teams. You have formed school emergency response team. You have done what every school should do. And I must highlight this at this point, because this is what current state of knowledge across the world says. Form your school emergency response team, form your pre-prepared action plans, don't react in the last minute, be ready for the new normal and be prepared and conduct audits at all times to make sure you are responding. Sorry, I interrupted.
Thank you, sir. Positive intervention is always welcome. Yeah. So I would just like to ask, among you who wants to take up first to talk about the mental well-being of the child, which is largely hampered from all the ages, even a 3-year-old child or a 10 years old or a 15-year-old child. We are finding some kind of symptoms in them which were not there when they were living naturally, going out and having their own life. So any one of you, if you can take up these questions, and please let us know that what is the negative side of this whole taking care of our children at home by keeping them isolated.
I will start with a few points and then others can add in, Dr. Anand and Dr. Preet. Just to start the conversation, just a couple of hours ago in my OPD, I saw a child, which is probably normal now across Bangalore for all pediatricians. The child had gained about 18 kgs in the last 20 months, who is just all of 11 years old. So you can imagine, I mean, as doctors, we all have a WhatsApp group, and this we get to hear all the time. Children gaining weight due to lack of activity, mindless eating. So this is just a physical part of it. So there are two kinds. One is the physical aspect of the entire pandemic situation, and then of course there is a mental aspect. So across different age group, it is affected differently. Since I think the whole group is the Montessori age group children, so what we are seeing as pediatricians, this particular age group, which is between 3 and say 7 years of age, on one hand, they are watching the television where, grim things are being told and parents are apprehensive, parents are anxious. They talk about, so many bad things happening outside. So they are, listening to the whole thing. They're processing it in their own way. They are not able to express what they really feel about it, but they are processing it in their own way and they're reacting it in their own way. By, we're seeing a lot of behavioral changes, aggression, social withdrawal. Child doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to step out. So we're also seeing different kinds of families. There is one set of family who, don't care about what is happening and they don't practice guidelines. There is some who are balanced and they practice and they allow the child to, go out there, but with certain precautions. There is a third set who are completely withdrawn. They have just closed themselves. They are just not allowing the child to step out, do anything, So this is the kind of family where the child is likely to suffer anxiety and social withdrawal, and they'll resort to their own way of handling the stress. Probably it could be screen addiction. They get glued to the TV or the mobile or whatever the parent is giving them access to. So this is the typical age group that we are seeing these behaviors. Dr. Preet and Dr. Anand can add to these points.
Yeah. See, one thing we need to remember, man is a social animal. This was what we were taught in maybe when we were in primary school. We cannot live in isolation for a long time. We have been in isolation for about 1.5 years already. And the virus is going to be with us for another 2 or 3 years. We may be having multiple waves, maybe smaller waves may be there. And gradually it will become endemic and there will be some amount of seasonal variations will be there. What we are finding in our children over the last 1.5 years, one, obesity. That is one thing which has occurred mainly because of lack of exercise, overeating, and eating a lot of junk food. And then second thing, obesity leading to some of the endocrine disturbances. Some of them have already gone into precocious puberty. So some of them have matured earlier than the expected age. This is one thing which we are really worried about. Increased incidence of urinary tract infections, increased incidence of PCODs in girl children because of lack of exercise. Of course, school dropouts, malnutritions, these are normally seen, but most often in semi-urban areas or rural areas is seen. Apart from that, ophthalmic complications that we are seeing, dry eyes, increase in refractive errors, some of the children coming with squint due to excessive screen addiction. What we do allow is about maximum for this age. Ideally, we do say no screen time. But now since the schools are there, that's inevitable. We allow about 1 hour of screen time. But children are getting addicted to gadgets. That itself is causing problems at home. Apart from that, if you look at the mental health of the child is completely disturbed. We find different manifestations of anxiety, starting from social withdrawal, wherein in fact, I saw one of the patients in the OPD who was scared even to look at other children in the OPD. And he was telling, I'm scared. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to see that child. I don't want to talk to anyone here, Mama. This is something which is really scary, actually. A child who is about 4 to 5 years of age, who should be going around and talking to other children who are there in the OPD, who should be interacting with other children, is scared to even look at their faces. So this is something which is going to have a major impact in the longer run. Apart from that, we do have children coming with sleep disorders. Apart from sleep disorders, they do have bedwetting. Maybe because of anxiety, or they are scared. Some of them are really complaining that they are scared to go to the toilet. This is another problem which we are finding. Constipation as a result of getting scared to go to the toilet. And some girls are having menstrual disturbances also. Some of them have gone into depression, violent behavior amongst the adolescents. This, in fact, I was really surprised with the way one of the patients was talking to her mother when she was in the OPD, because mother was not allowing her to look into the mobile continuously. The child wanted to be on the mobile. She has completed her 10th standard now, but they have not had any exams. So she has completed her 10th standard. She is waiting for the 11th standard to start. And she's getting violent because mother is not allowing her to be on the mobile 12 to 13 hours in a day. So this is another problem which we are finding. Apart from that, what we are finding in children who are having these anxiety disorders, how well will we be able to rehabilitate them? The most important thing that we need to do now is to get them to interact with children of their age group. Classes are going on true. They are getting about 15 minutes time to interact with children of their age group, but that is not sufficient. They need more one-to-one interaction. They need to have more friends. So one thing we always advocate, give them good physical activity. minimum 2 hours of physical activity is required. Take them out, put a mask, take them out, take them for a walk, go to a place where there is no crowd. You can take them out on a bicycle, let them cycle, get them a skipping rope, start aerobics. You can dance with them. You can learn Bharatanatyam. You can do whatever dance you dance with your child. So get them to do some sort of physical activity. At least 2 hours of physical activity in a day is required for these children, which is not being done, and we are ending up having a lot of problems. Not only physical problems, we are having problems with their mental health. This is really distressing, actually. Mental health problems are difficult to handle in the longer run. Dr. Anand, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted. I thought I lost track. Yeah. No. So I also wanted to bring a perspective which is even a bit more futuristic. Okay. Let us look at these children 4, 5 years, 10 years down the line. What are we likely to see if this continues this way? We have this something called the hygiene hypothesis. These kind of airway disease, reactive airway diseases, etc., are more in the West and less in the developing nations. Now, the kind of hygiene practices which is good for us to prevent some of these infectious diseases will lead to definitely a spurt in other diseases which are based on their exposure patterns in early childhood. This we will see in the years to come. Second thing, the mental health aspect which both doctors stressed upon, we have to look about it from the future also. In the future, these children will move from current social circumstances of playing in groups to making lifelong friendships, meaningful relationships. How will this period of isolation impact these as they grow up? Therefore, it is very important for us. This is the foundation of mental health. If you go back to close space,
I think his network is not very stable. So I would, I have to go to the next question now. Lot of the parents have asked about the vaccination. So I cannot, tell one name. So only after vaccination, I'll be sending my child to school, or what will happen if child goes to school and gets, infected when the child is coming back home? What will happen to the people who are already vaccinated? And what if somebody has not been vaccinated? What will be the situation? So from that angle and about the third wave, we could see a lot of insecurity among all the parents. And that question is repeated several times. So if Dr. Preet can answer, or Dr. Deepa can answer, any one of you, please go ahead.
See, first and foremost, third wave is hypothetical. So there is no clear-cut data that we are going to get the third wave. Our focus has to be to prevent the third wave. How well we can prevent the third wave? We need to follow COVID appropriate behavior. So proper masking is a must, especially adults who go out to work have to wear at least double masking is required. And if possible, wear a face shield and go. Never touch your mask when you are out. Never remove your mask to talk to any of your friends or to any stranger. Never remove your mask to have a cup of coffee or tea or have some snacks with any of your friends. Please don't do that. He may be your close friend. Okay, he might get offended, but don't carry the infection back home. All infections in pediatric age group occur at home. They get the infection from infected parents or infected adults at home. So all adults, when they get a chance to get vaccinated, need to get vaccinated. All adults are having a chance to get vaccinated. So please go ahead and get yourselves vaccinated. If you are having any comorbidities, ask your physician about the comorbidity and then go ahead and get yourself vaccination. Second thing, follow COVID appropriate behavior. Wherever you go, wear a mask properly. Double masking is must, and proper masking is very important. And wear a face shield. Third, proper hand hygiene. Avoid crowded places. Don't go for any marriages. Don't go for places where you tend to remove your mask and then mingle with your friends or relatives and then be in a crowd. That is where the infections are spreading. Don't go to a crowded market. Try to avoid crowded market. You can buy things from shops near your home where there is no crowd, or you can go at a time when there is no crowd. So that is one part wherein you can prevent infection from coming into your home. Regarding children, you need to give them good physical activity to improve their immunity. Make sure they have good homemade food, lot of fruits, vegetables, good hydration. So make sure they take sufficient amount of water, they take sufficient amount of good food, curds, buttermilk, tender coconut water. Don't go for juices, instead have whole fruits. Apart from that, teach them to wear the mask properly. Even if children get vaccinated, when they have to come back to school, they need to wear the mask for the next 2 years, definitely. So train them to use the mask now itself. Train them to wash their hands properly. Train them not to touch the tea area. So eyes, nose, and mouth. Train them not to go and crowd around your friends. So train them to go for good physical activity. You can go in for non-contact sports, cycling, jogging, aerobics, yoga, pranayama, all this will help you. When their turn comes for vaccination, you can go ahead and vaccinate them. But mind you, it's a huge population of pediatric population in our country. It's 41% of our population is less than 18 years of age. The high risk group amongst this is 12 to 18 years, who need to be vaccinated first. Then the 6 to 12 years will come. So by the time your children get their chance, it will be another 1.5 years. So this huge population cannot be vaccinated in a matter of 2 or 3 months. Understand, the capacity of vaccine manufacturers are also limited. Overnight, it is not going to increase. So, of course, vaccine trials are going on. Vaccine trials are in their end stage of phase 2 trials. We will do get the vaccine maybe by about September, October. But first will be the high priority group of 12 to 18 years. Only after that, 6 to 12 years will come. Then only younger children will be vaccinated. Mind you, children of this age do not get severe infection. Even if they get exposed, see, one more thing, the transmission of infection amongst children is very less, which has been proven in countries where smaller children have been allowed to go to school. Schools are open in Taiwan, schools are open in US, schools are open in UK. Some states in US it is open, some states it is open for all the age groups, some states it is open for younger children only. And even in those states, what has been found, when the caregivers in the school, teachers and other caregivers in the school and parents are properly vaccinated, transmission of infection has been very, very minimal. And even if they catch the infection is 80 to 85% asymptomatic. Very few of them have mild symptoms, and very, very few of them do end up having moderate to severe infection. So the numbers will be very less. Even if they bring the infection to home, if your parents or yourselves are vaccinated, infection that you get will be very mild or asymptomatic. That is the advantage of vaccination. Vaccination will not prevent the infection, but it will reduce the severity of the infection to mild or asymptomatic infection. So vaccinating adults is the priority, and at the same time, training our children to use the mask to maintain hand hygiene and maintaining social distancing is the priority now. Dr. Deepa, you can go ahead.
Yeah, see, as you all know, I think this is the fastest vaccine that has been tested and approved in the, known to mankind. And the reason is obvious because of, the deadly virus needed to be controlled. And there's a reason why the 60 plus were the priority, and then the 45 plus were included, and then the 18 plus, and children are the ones which have been given the last priority. As we all know that, they are the least affected ones. So if you are asking that, should children be sent only after they are vaccinated, my answer is no, because it is going to take a little time, a long time, in fact, for all the younger age group to get vaccinated. And we cannot wait that long for the schools to start. For any major decisions to be taken, we should always, weigh the risks and the benefits of carrying out a certain activity. So right now, I feel that the schools restarting with appropriate precautions and behavioral modifications is extremely important. And definitely vaccination can happen when it is the right time and all the appropriate the results of the trials are out and they're approved. Then one can go with it. So our major concern, even for the schools to restart, was basically that children carrying the illness back home and giving it to the vulnerable population. Children themselves getting illness was not really the first concern. So once the adult population is covered, in a large percentage, even if the child carries the virus home, the adult or the elderly people who get the infection from the child are likely to have a milder form of the illness. As we all know, even in the second wave, towards the end of second wave, as the vaccine coverage, started to go up, we could see all around us that people at least who got one dose of the vaccine were doing much better than the ones who did not get a single dose of the vaccine. So eventually, when the schools are going to restart, our vaccine coverage will be much higher. So we are that way, we are secure that, that part of the problem is tackled. And somebody was asking about the child not being able to wear the mask, for more than an hour. So less than 2-year-old, we do not recommend masking at all, because there are other issues which may be, counterproductive, because the child is going to salivate, the child is going to bite the mask is going to become wet. So I would say, don't even attempt to put a mask on less than a 2-year-old. Even though I should say, as a clinician, we see even a 1-year-old, 18 months old wearing the mask beautifully, not even, bothered by it. And they're very comfortable with it. But the recommendation is less than 2-year-old, do not stress on masking. Between 2 and 5, there is still a little bit of gray area. If child is comfortable, eventually you will have to pack a few extra masks, because when the masks are going to get wet, you will have to replace it. You have to train the, the caretaker, the teacher, or the child to change the mask when it gets wet, because a wet mask is as good as, no mask. And third thing is, as Dr. Anand also stressed, you make sure that the classrooms are well ventilated, which I'm sure, because ventilation has been found to be the most important factor which contributes in reducing the chances of transmission. The less ventilation, the much higher is the transmission. And social distancing with probably, if the child is feeling breathless or the child is jumping and feels uncomfortable with the mask on, you can, with under supervision, maintain the, the social distancing and give a 2 to 3 minutes of mask-free period and put it back on. So those are the things that we can, explore and think about.
My apologies for having gotten disconnected, but just since I'm back, I'm remembering the Olympics, because we are in the midst of the Olympics, right? So we know that we are not the only country facing COVID. I am talking about Olympics because every country is facing the challenge of COVID. Every country has schools and has question on whether to reopen schools and when and what when. We are actually one of the last countries where we are still debating when to reopen schools. Australia is open, UK is open, US was open before the summer break. Many countries were open, children are going to school, and it's the childhood vaccination has not started in those countries. Only 12 to 18, limited number of doses are available. In US especially is good coverage. Okay. So vaccination will not be prerequisite for other countries. With the Olympics, we can be sure it should not be prerequisite for us also. If they can manage and win gold medals, we can also do well. There is no problem. Our children are no different. Our children can go and do well in international forum. We should also follow good international practices. There is nothing that prevents that. But going back to what I said earlier, the principle of vaccination has to base on principle of safety and principle of need. And if children don't get severe COVID, unless we are trying to cut transmission, which the nasal vaccine, which is being produced by one of our manufacturers, is still in the lines, there will be actually a question on how long we want to measure safety in children with vaccine, etc. before we introduce. I can understand government's anxiety. It wants to be prepared. Being prepared does not mean that we should panic. Being prepared is not being panicked. At this stage, we can safely, with all precautions, start thinking of how children have to get back to avoid long-term consequences of social maladjustment and physical health.
Thank you, Dr. Shetty. Thank you, Dr. Deepa, and thank you, Dr. Anand. I would like to call our chairman, Mr. Chaitanya, to say a few words while we are almost at the end of the panel discussion. Sir, over to you.
Namaste. Good evening. Thank you, doctors, for coming. Thanks for all the information you've given us. In fact, there is one interesting question which I want to put across to the panel. They say, which age group should first come to school? Of all the first standard to 10th standard, let's say, or pre-primary to 10th standard, what is the right age group to come to school? And some are pinning us down by saying, when should it be ideal to come to school? Dr. Preet, if you can please take this question.
See, younger the child should be the first one to come back to school, because the risk of infection in younger children is lesser. Severity of infection is lesser. Okay, that is one thing. Second thing, the transmission rate in younger children is lesser. Child-to-child transmission rate is much, much lesser. So they are the safest ones to come back to school. So how early can they come back to school is again a hypothetical question now, because see, if we are able to maintain COVID appropriate behavior, we should be able to at least postpone the wave 3, or we may be able to wave 3 if we adults follow COVID appropriate behavior. So that is one thing which we need to emphasize here. And younger children will do well when they come back to school. They are safe in the school, and especially younger children will also listen to you, the teachers. So they will keep the mask when you say, and they will also not crowd around if you say. It may not be possible with older children who are in high school or in college, because I see a lot of children who go to the high school or PUC. I used to see them before the second wave. So they would not listen to the teachers. They would crowd around my clinic. Also, I would see some of them crowding around and taking off their mask, talking continuously, having some coffee or having a bite of chocolate or something. Okay, so that age is pretty difficult to control also. But younger children are the safest ones to come back to school. When is a question which I think the government will have to answer, because unless the government approves, none of the schools will be able to get these children back to school, I believe.
Thank you, Doctor. I think Dr. Anand wants to take this question, same question. Why did the first wave, the high school opened, and why pre-primary never opened? If that's the doctor's opinion, that the first children to go to school should have been pre-primary. Looks like we're going exactly otherwise. Dr.
Yeah. So, one is evidence on this has been coming through in batches, right? The first wave evidence and then the second wave evidence is like we have collected. In first wave itself, international studies showed what Dr. Preet was saying. Children to children transmission in younger children is very low. And that has been maintained in second wave. Also, the studies are showing across the world. Okay. Why these principles? You see, most of the decision making is government's decision making is based on very basic safety from the perspective, not from scientific, epidemiological, all these frameworks, right? For in Indian context, education means board exams. Education means getting through board exams and getting to university. The foundational years of learning are not even considered education, which is why we have a free for all in foundational year of education, if I may say that, right? So we don't view this as as a problem which is related to how children are going. See, your school at least is lucky, right? Fortunate. You have parents who can think of the poor children in government schools. My maid's children in class 4 and 6 have forgotten single digit addition. Okay, so the government cannot continue to play it safe in the lack of evidence, but evidence is very clear. Younger children should come back to school first. For that we need the media also to say the same thing and not play up this whole thing. For example, few cases of MISC, and everyday Times of India reports about MISC. Dr. Preet, Dr. Deepa will tell you what MISC is all about. I mean, there has not been a single mortality except for that one child who had type 1 diabetes. So this is the media has to be responsible, and the entire decision making has to be based on epidemiology and science, and then we have to build confidence of parents. If parents are willing to take that scientific evidence and confidence, I'm sure younger children will come back to school first.
Thank you. It's time for me to give a Thanksgiving. Thank you, Dr. Anand, Dr. Deepa, and Dr. Preet for coming with your busy schedule. Thank you, Joyita, for making this a wonderful MC-ship. I want to thank all the parents by saying we are very grateful that you are taking our shoes and you're trying to play our role sitting home and trying to help your children with academics. But deep down, being a Montessori basics, we understand very clearly it is not academics what we want to deal with. It's not just 1, 2, 3 and ABCD what we want to deal with. It's so much in this age. This is the age where their potential is extremely high. Age group of 2 to 6 is when their potential is maximum. My potential is a fraction of it. And at that time, we are actually losing out on that time, which is a very sad thing. And somebody had asked a question saying that, are you doing this to reopen the school? That's not the idea. When to reopen, how to reopen, we don't know. But somebody has to tie the bell. Somebody has to bell the cat. Somebody has to talk about it. We have to. Someday it has to reopen, right? It just cannot go for infinity. Someday it has to. So someday the talk should start. Someday slowly students should start moving in. And in this forum, I'm very pleased to announce that we have managed to get all our students at least once in the last 2 weeks. Across 2 weeks, in 15 days, we call them in small groups. We put them in rooms to discuss, to have some laughter. We call the young children with the parents so that they can sit and understand what school is. Somewhere the little feet should start moving into school for much larger purpose than the academics itself. Thanks a lot. Let's see how it all pans out. Thank you, doctors. It's really kind of you to be a part of us. It was really informative. Thank you, parents. Thank you, principal. And there have been our admin team, Ashok, Nagarjun, Sanjay, and Mala, who's working tirelessly behind to make this show happen. Sincere thanks for them as well. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.